Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Greetings. You're listening to So There I Was. It's how all great aviation tales begin. This is episode 75. Don't beat the Olympic runner, please.
A sponsor this week is Babbel. Learn a new language and hold meaningful conversations in as little as 3 weeks with proven techniques only available at Babbel. And our listeners get 55% off by going to babbel.com/so-there-I-was. We'll talk more about that during the show.
Regardless of whether you ultimately decide to buy, visiting our sponsor link lets our sponsors know you're listening. So please visit them and give their products a look. And as usual, this week we ask you to keep sending your photos of where you are when listening to the show. They're being posted on our Facebook group, So There I Was. Come join us if you're not there. This week we have one from Yogi in front of Buckingham Palace, and he writes, quote, maybe the only time someone was hearing about fister, ass, and tranny so close to royalty, unquote.
It's a big shout out to our newest Patreon pilot, Steve Coach Dido. Welcome aboard, and thank you for your support. We're thrilled to have you here.
And let me take a moment to thank all of our supporters. We've got Keith Gallagher, Yogi, Marcus Ponte, Stephen Blunk, Peter Duncan, Donut, Jason Spears, Chucker, Eric Fletcher, Patrick McLight, Trixity, Chuck Thompson, Scott Southard, Justin Lundberg Neff, Scott Walsh, Vapor, Jonathan Knuckles, Dragger, Bill Wilson, Double L, Chris Blaine, A.E. Schmidt, Hawktard, John Hall, Sticks. That's you, John.
Hi.
Wayne Batzer, Scott Christensen, Cal Stewart, Mike Price, and Peter Robinson, Salvatore Marinello, a.k.a. Sal, Earl McCoy, Chase Cole, and Stephen Bates. Master.
If you'd like to be a Patreon pilot, section lead, division lead, or tanker aircraft commander, visit us at sothereiwas.us/Patreon. And to support us in other ways, the number one way you can help is by sharing this show with others. Share the show, please.
Do it now. Go share the show. Listeners, welcome back. I'm your Co-Horst, RePete, and as you can hear, joining me for the very first time is our guest Co-Horst, Sticks.
Thrilled to be here, RePete, especially for episode 75. How did this happen? How did we get here?
Right? Man, time goes fast when you're having fun, and we are having a blast doing this. But time does fly, just like our guest today. Folks, we've got Briggs with us, a formidable Navy EP-3 pilot whose stories span from the racetracks to the vast European skies.
And speaking of tracks, this man wasn't just running. He was flying on foot, leaving a blazing trail on both high school and college tracks.
Absolutely. But a real twist in his life came when a piece of advice from a Marine officer led him to the Navy, cutting short his efforts to go into the Marine Corps and a 2-year wait to become a naval aviator. Good advice from a Marine captain sent him towards the Navy, which is where he wound up ultimately.
And while flight school had its highs and lows, it was the guidance of a Marine Corps captain during his struggling days in the instrument phase that not only shaped his career, but also created a lifelong bond.
Right. And once out of flight school, Europe beckoned. There in the vast expanse, Briggs learned invaluable leadership lessons, all while soaring in an EP-3, thanks to a squadron executive officer he greatly admired.
So, listeners, I want to warn you, this guest is so downplaying a major significant event in his aviation career. Imagine losing control of your aircraft and not being able to change the pitch, not being able to get the aircraft pointed back towards the ground.
Or back towards the sky if you're headed nose down.
Or if you're heading up that way too. It can be both. It can be bad. Either way.
This was bad. And he just downplayed it. Like, no big deal. The elevator freezes
totally.
all the time.
Yeah.
This happens. Yeah, look, a tense 25 minutes and 3 pilots muscling this airplane later in a race against time over the Mediterranean is what happened here. And we'll let Briggs give you all the heart-stopping details, although he does it in such a calm manner. You're likely to not notice how bad, what extremis they were in.
Oh, it was insane. And for those needing a lighter note, brace yourself for a hilarious tale involving an Olympic runner, a sports drink commercial, and a surprising outcome. It's almost like a setup for a joke.
Indeed. Setting the tone for today's episode title, Don't Beat the Olympic Runner, Please.
So gear up. Episode 75 promises a whirlwind of emotions. Don't sit on the ejection handle and don't let go of the collective. Here comes Briggs.
In the world's smallest cockpit, on the tanker, through the weather. Oh, and to the tanker crew who did that, thanks a lot. We really appreciated that. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. Well, there I was, crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly fond of all the...
Well, so there I was. It was dark 30, late July morning in Pensacola, Florida. I was woken up by a large metal trash can hitting the foot of my bed, bouncing all over the room, hitting the other racks. My roommates and I all jumped up, stood at attention at the foot of our racks. 4 of the toughest United States Marine Corps drill instructors entered the room. One walked right toward me with fire in his blue eyes, and the rim of his campaign cover just walked right up to me and was bumping it off the bridge of my nose. He was barking orders at me, and all I can think of, what the hell did I get into?
And that's how all great aviation tales begin. Greetings, everybody. RePete here, coming to you from New Hampshire. We've got a special Co-Horst joining us today. Sticks, welcome.
And welcome, Pete. And Briggs, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for inviting me, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to have you. So that's our special guest today, Briggs, United States Navy, Echo Papa, EP3 pilot joining us. But he just talked a little bit about his first day in the Navy. Sounds like a special one, like many of us experienced in our military careers. Holy smokes. So how did you wind up getting yourself into that? Not what did you get into, but how did you get into?
Well, it's kind of a long, slow story, but I grew up in the middle of Iowa, Des Moines, Iowa, one of the suburbs. I loved airplanes. I loved history. I loved tanks, military history and things, but the rest of the school they didn't really care about. But what I found out was early on that I was extremely fast at running track. I was a sprinter. And I loved reading, what I couldn't really I couldn't care about when in school, but I could make up on the track. I could beat pretty much anybody I ran against, and that was great for my ego.
Beautiful.
But I loved reading about espionage stories, spy stories, Cold War stories, and also the only person in my family, blood related, that had served, including both World Wars, was an uncle of mine who served in Vietnam as a Marine, who actually went out into the jungle.
Okay.
But from track and field, I became a kind of an overly competitive kid. I was really scrawny, wasn't quite big enough for football, but I could run. And it's, I was a lot of cockiness and arrogance about me. I remember, if you know how track runs, it's an oval. They stagger you in the turn.
Okay.
And I would walk up to the runner on the inside lane, whether it was a relay or the race itself, and would say, when the gun goes off, you're not going to see me. I'll be gone. That's kind of, the cocky and arrogance that I grew up with. But,
nicely done.
Yeah. It kind of psyched me up to do my best and stuff.
Sure.
But, ended up attending a Division III school just south of east of Des Moines called Central.
Okay.
I loved it. Studied a lot. Didn't get outstanding grades, but I survived. Found out later I was a little bit dyslexic. But when I looked at it as I was starting approaching my senior year, I majored as computer programming. It was okay. Management, fine. I didn't want to kind of sit behind the desk. So I kind of figured I wanted to do something different and kind of play along with it. And the summer of 1984, just finished my junior year prior to going into my senior year. I got selected to run with a track team over in Eastern Europe.
Nice. Okay.
1984, Cold War, still the Cold War.
Right.
Stuff I've read about, just excited to go over there. So I got to visit Yugoslavia, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Poland, and run in various track meets and stuff. But still, I was kind of looking forward to my senior year, like, gee, what am I going to do? I don't know anything. And as much as I had so much fun over there, I really didn't. We were sitting in a Frankfurt airport waiting to come back to the States after being gone for 6 weeks. And as I was sitting there, I was looking out the window and I saw military aircraft taking off, and it just hit me. Some people get this, that it's just their life just kind of turns around in a complete second, and it hit me. I'm going to go in the military and fly.
Sweet.
So as I got back to the States, I called my parents and I told them, I know what I want to do. I want to fly in the military. I think my dad was excited because he finally saw that I had a goal in the future. Mom was a little slow to pick it up, but, she caught on to it and stuff. Went to the Air Force, just didn't give me good vibes. Called a Navy recruiter. I don't know who I talked to, but he said, well, we don't know if the Navy needs pilots right now, which is kind of ironic looking back because it was the big Reagan buildup.
Right.
So my uncle was a Marine. So I called the Marines, and the recruiter from Des Moines spoke to the sergeant, came down the next day to my college at Central, gave me the test, administered the test, did fine. He took it back and said, great, we're going to process you. They actually sent me up to the old NAS Glenview for medical and things like this.
Yeah,
go
get that flight physical.
Yeah, it was a good physical, very detailed. But at the time, my as we approached the spring track season, I was going to go to OCS. I researched it all, OCS, TBS, bought books about Marine aircraft, the Harrier, the Hornets, things like this. I was all set to go. But it turns out about a couple weeks before I graduated, the recruiter called and said, we can't get you a billet for 2 years. And, with OCS and TBS, that kind of pushes everything back.
Right.
And I thought, well, okay. But he said, the Navy needs pilots. Do you want me to submit your package to them?
That's,
said, sure.
that's insane. The thing I want to point out about that is that just demonstrates outstanding leadership. The fact that they were willing to say, okay, you know what, you want to fly, I'm going to look out for what your needs are. That's just awesome.
Yeah, it was, the next day, a recruiter from Omaha called me and said, hey, we got your package. It all looks great. You just need to get some wisdom teeth out. And I said, well, I can't get it done until after, I graduate and such. And he said, well, I need to know what kind of, can you get somebody to time you in the mile? And I said, well, I've got track practice tonight. I'll just have the coach time me afterwards. And he goes, oh, you run track? And I said, yeah. And he goes, what kind of times do you run? And I told him, what I did in 100, 200, 400. And he goes, don't worry about it. We'll take care of that. So
Not a problem.
Yeah, no problem. So after the national track meet, got the wisdom teeth out, and then I waited, took a sales job for about a week and learned I didn't want to do sales at all. I was not that type of person. But when I got the call to show up in late July in Pensacola for AOCS, boy, I was raring to go. I just got up, walked out, and off I went to AOCS.
Nice. And there you awakened to a pleasant smile.
Yes. My recruiter was in Des Moines, was really good about preparing me for AOCS with Pressure Point. They had a video I should watch.
I
gave me
bet
some
that's on YouTube. I haven't looked for it. You mentioned that when we did the pre-talk, and I remember watching Pressure Point way back in the day when I was getting ready to go to OCS. I thought, okay, what's this about? I went, I'm not sure I want to do this.
Well, it's like the recruiter had told me, and he was flat out. He wasn't trying to sales job me at all, but at the same time, he was upfront and honest. He goes, the Navy, along with the Coast Guard and the Marine, we train the best pilots. That's how he put it. Yeah. And we're going to just start you up right. And that's what it was. And, I listened to your Gunny Go podcast.
Wasn't he great?
Yeah, that was great. It was interesting to listen to their perspective on it. But I got down to Pensacola, and like I said, we get woken up by that trash can. I think that went all week.
I got a story there. I'm just going to jump in
ahead.
for a quick second. So I went to the Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point, and so we're same routine. They pick up the trash can, they throw it down the hall. It's actually our in-dock is run by the Marine Corps. Anyways, one of our drill instructors threw the trash can down the hall, and somebody overnight had put trash in it. And next thing you know, you're hearing, "Who the hell put trash in my alarm clock?"
Yeah.
Perfect.
So that was my first day that I entered with, and so there I was, my first day of being indoctrinated to the United States Navy.
Yeah.
On that.
So Colin McCann on Facebook heard that, and he said he gave the link. I'm showing it at the bottom of the screen, but it's. I will put a link in the show notes up on sothereiwas.us, so you can go and find that. It's quite entertaining, actually.
Yeah.
If you like laughing at guys getting screamed at and all that. But here's the thing. The whole point of it was, tell me if my recollection's wrong. The point of it is it's teaching you that what you're about to go through has a purpose. It's going to break you down as an individual, build you back up as a team member, but someone who can be relied on to pay attention to detail and not quit when things suck.
Right. It was Aviation Officer Candidate School, and I mentioned about my arrogance and ego and all that. Boy, it just busted down to nothing. And here I was with Marine drill instructors taking us through the first week of AOCS, Aviation Officer Candidate School. I think we started with about 88. And one of the toughest things about that 14-week school was you could quit at any time.
Right.
All you had to say was, I quit, drop on request, you were gone. You
became he who shall not be named.
And
who was that? Who was who?
That's right. And you make
gone.
a friend with somebody, and next day they DOR'd. They were gone. Yeah. And it was just that part of it. Swimming, academics. I was not a swimmer. I could run. I could swim. If I put my toe in the water of a pool, I went right down to the bottom. And you guys probably remember this, but
so you're running on that 8% body fat or less.
Oh, I think I was even less than that way back then, if I could get that back. But yeah. But the thing is, when you're going through those schools, it's always the little things that seem to help. For instance, you do a tower jump. It's like off a high dive. You're in your flight suit. You jump. You hit the water, but then you had to swim all the way to the far long end of the pool. And you get to the end, so you stand up there, take a huge breath, hit the water, boom, you lose all your breath because of the pressure. It just forces the air out of your lungs.
Right.
You can't make it. Try it a second time. If you do it a third time, if you don't make it a third time, you fail. So I was up there on the third time, and I don't know if later I learned they were just pilots, commissioned officers waiting to go to training. They were called stashed ensigns or second lieutenants.
Okay.
And they were up there to help out. And one of them just kind of leaned over to me real quietly and he said, "Don't take a full breath. Just take half a breath." Okay. So I took a half a breath, hit the water and going, wow, I feel great. And I swam all the way to the end. So I passed that phase. When it came down to the treading water part, I was actually taught a different way to tread water. And I created my own vacuum and went straight to the bottom. Remember that 40 pounds of equipment and gear on. Yep. Trying to tread water, and every time I did, I'd create my own vacuum and go straight down. One of the whoever, and I thanked them for it. I wish I could go back 30 plus years and thank them for it, but I'll do that now. He walked up and he said, "Look, do you know how to breaststroke?" And I said, "Sure." And he goes, "Just do little breaststrokes in the water. You're creating your own vacuum." So I did that. And I'm like, well, this is a piece of cake. Why didn't anybody tell me this sooner? So I think it was, so it's just little things like that it's just amazing how little people or little things in your life can help you to continue on, type
Sure.
thing. So, AOCS was, we could spend hours on it. The professionalism of the drill instructors. There's First Gunnery Sergeant Crouch has collected stories over the years, and what we went through in '85 was the same. They went through the same thing in '67 and things like that. So it was a great indoctrination program for those of us that didn't have ROTC or Naval Academy experience, and we got at the end. We were commissioned on November 1st, and we became naval ensigns.
Nice.
That's awesome.
All Saints Day of '85.
Yeah, good year for me.
Yeah.
So I got assignment to my training squadron. We were flying T-34 Charlies, the Turbo Mentors,
Right.
twin seat back-to-back aircraft, and checked into squadron. It was called VT2 Doer Birds at Whiting Field, which is northeast of Pensacola.
Right.
We used to refer to it as,
we've covered this before, but let me just briefly jump in. So VT stands for fixed wing, and T is trainer. So fixed wing training squadron 2 at NAS Whiting in Milton, Florida. So that's up on our glossary. It's thereos.us/glossary. You can find HT, HMA, HMLA, all that sort of what that all means. But those letters all mean something in the Navy and the Marine Corps. So sorry about that, Briggs.
Well,
go ahead,
I was
Sticks.
VT3, so
Okay.
the Red Knights, which is actually right next door to VT2.
Yep, I remember the buildings. So we were VT2 going through the FAM stage, which they called it familiarization stage. Guys like me, I hardly had any flight time going into the Navy, and so it's kind of a steep learning curve for that. You worked hard, you studied hard, you drive home at night exhausted, but you got to study to get up for the next morning flight. So you're always just, flying type thing. So made it to my soloed, had a wonderful time with that. Just went out, did straight and level solo coming back. And then you move into your aerobatics phase where you get to do loops, half Cuban eights, Immelmans, those types of maneuvers, which are a lot of fun. You're upside down pulling the G's on that.
Yep.
So I got signed off to do my solo. One morning, I went in early to check in for my, we called it precision acrobatics or PA solo. I think it was like flight 15 or something. And I went in, and in VT2, I don't know how 3 was, but you had to check in with the duty officer, the instructor on duty for that day. So I'd walk up, as I did for every flight. Sir Ensign Briggs, checking in, reporting for precision aerobatic flight 15. Sir. Well, as I did this, it was a blonde Marine captain sitting behind the desk. He was about 6'3" and stuff. And he leans back like this. And he looks at me. And he said, Ensign Briggs, are you single?
Who wants to know, sir?
All right.
You're a nice looking guy and all, Captain. But,
I know we're a sea service, but really?
And I said, well, yes, sir. And he looks at me again and he said, are you seeing anybody? And I said, no, sir, I'm not. He said, well, I've got a niece coming in, or she's been here for a little while. She's kind of bored. She's coming in from Connecticut. And would you mind taking her out to dinner and a movie later? Yes, sir.
It'll get me in an airplane. I'm in.
Well, he's a Marine captain. I'm an ensign in the Navy, 03 to 01. I mean, what could I say? Yes, sir. You happy
This
to,
is like
sir.
a troll guarding the bridge. Yes, you can fly a plane, but first you must date my niece.
That's right. The Holy Grail. So and he said, he looks up at the board and he goes, here's your aircraft. Here's where it's parked. I'll get everything arranged. And I said, yes, sir. And off I went. So I started up, went out, did my solo, flew as far as you could. But back then you could do, if you wanted to extend, you could go back to the squadron and said, this is Ensign Briggs aircraft, 234. I'd like to extend 15 more minutes to get permission. So I called back because I was just having fun out there. And he gets on the radio. Well, John, I got everything set up for you. Everything's great. When you get back, I'll give you the address. Come by our place later tonight. Yes, sir. We'll be there. So he landed. He gave me the address and went home, changed, showered, and everything. Went up there. Met him at met the captain's wife, met the family, took her out. I was a real gentleman, got her back, at a decent time. I didn't get in trouble from an 03. We may have gone out once or twice, but that was about it. And I hadn't seen Captain Velzbar is his name. And I hadn't seen, his first name was Peter, and I hadn't seen him, I think, for 2 weeks or so. Because from the PA, you go into do the sims. So I was doing the simulator work. And I finished up the advanced, what they call radio instrument training. I think it was simulator 7 or so. And the next flight, you go out and you do the flight in the airplane. And this flight is in the back seat of the T-34, and you take a bag and you pull it after you get airborne. The instructor will get airborne and pull that over. You guys know what happens after that. Your first flight in the airplane. It's what we call vertigo. Remember?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I was flying with a captain, Marine Captain Hall, very super professional. We had a good briefing. I knew all my stuff going in there. My arrogance was a little coming back. But we took off. He said, okay, you can put the bag on. And as soon as the bag went on, every brain cell in my head just went.
Don't know whether I'm upside down, inside
Vertigo,
out.
noise. I couldn't remember the altitudes, the airspeeds, flying the approaches. I couldn't do anything right. Nothing went right that entire flight. And, I tried to persevere, just keep going, trying to, and toward the end, I started pulling it together. Like, why are you flying 105 knots? I need to be flying 120 knots, type of thing. We get on the ground, we go on the debrief, and he's just sitting there and he's just looking at his notes, and he keeps looking at me, and he looks down at his notes. He looks at me and he goes, I know you know your stuff. And I was sat there and I thought, well, this is going to be my first down. And a first down is a failure of a flight. And back then, if you got 3 downs, you were gone. There was no questions.
Right. Yeah. So, and let me jump in real quick about that. So every flight is graded as you're going through flight school in Navy Marine Corps. You get an above average, an average, below average, or an unset, i.e. a down. And if you get a down on something, then the flight is an unset and has to be repeated. Or I think maybe there may have been at one point in time they're doing like 3 belows on a given flight would get you to it down too. But every flight was a check ride. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was terrifying. I mean, you had to show up knowing your stuff. Or
you did. We were graded on, I think, 14 to 20 items every flight. And there was always air work and head work was one of them.
That was always the catch-all, right? I mean, you could have had a stellar flight, but if you ticked them off or did something really screwed up, they'd get you on head work.
Yep, so, that's true. So he sat there and he looked at me and he goes, I know you know your stuff. And he goes, do you promise you're really gonna study, you're gonna chair fly tonight? And I said, yes, sir, I will. I feel so bad, even though it was a Friday night. Yes, I will work on it this weekend. And he said, okay, I'm going to give you 2 belows, blah, blah, and going forward. I said, thank you, sir, and moved on, as we all did, because we were students. Yes. Whatever grade you gave you said, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, and you moved on. So driving back home, I had about a 20-minute drive to my apartment. I didn't know what to do, and the next morning I woke up and I thought, I should call Captain Velzabar. I did him a favor. He could owe me a favor. So I called him, and I told him the situation, and he said, John, why don't you just show up in the squadron tomorrow about 2:00 and we'll go over instrument flying. I said, yes, sir, I'll be there. And I showed up and he was there waiting and he's just started out with the basics. Let's get back to basics of instrument flying. Yeah. There's three questions you got to ask. Where am I? Where am I going? And how am I going to get there? And he broke down into that way. He started to go over everything on instrument flying. And my learning curve just shot way up. And he said, what time do you fly tomorrow? Tomorrow was Monday. And I said, well, actually, sir, I'm with you at 11 o'clock. And he said, great, show up. So I did. We went out and flew. And we got back on the ground. I did my thing. He didn't say much. I did my thing, through all the procedures. We get on the ground, we get in the debriefing room, and he sits there and he looks at me and he said, I never really say this to anybody, and it has nothing to do with yesterday, but yesterday was one of the best hops with a student I've ever had. You performed immaculately. I'm like, wow. Well, thank you, sir. I mean, it's all credit back to you. So Peter and I remained friends for many years, and we still are friends today, but it's just amazing how a mentor just like that, who takes a couple hours out of their own day to work with somebody who's struggling. And with that, after I flew with him, we selected jets, props, helos. There were no props, or no jets that week, so I went props. And I ended up going to NAS Corpus Christi for advanced training in the T-44.
Right, which is that's a King Air, basically.
Yeah, it's a twin turboprop King Air, which is...
That's a handful of airplane to learn on.
It was, and it was a pure instrument panel. It was all instrument flying. You go out and you do your FAMs initially to get used to the airplane, your familiarization flights, and then after that, there I am. It's all instrument. And then the instructor, we sat in the left seat, as you can see in the photo, and the instructor would sit in the right seat. And on the right armrest of the instructor was called a God box. And on that, inside that box, he'd flip the lid off, and must have been a dozen or so toggle switches.
Oh, and he could fail any of your instruments?
He could just fail any instrument at any time, depending on what we were supposed to accomplish that day.
Oh, that's painful.
You'd be flying out, and
You're back to not only where am I going, and how am I going to get there, but when they start filling instruments, you're going, and what's my name, and why am I here?
Yes, exactly. And then why is that instrument turned like this?
Yeah, I'm not upside down.
Yeah.
Why is the instrument upside
Yeah.
down?
Exactly.
And the good ones would always fail it just as you were in a slight climb. So as you're looking at your instruments, it would show you level, but you're actually climbing or descending,
Okay.
So, and that's the training. But going back to what Peter had helped me with, what Captain Velzbar helped me with, was just incredible, where it carried forward into that stage to go through advanced training and then get winged in January of '87 out of Corpus Christi.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in real quick because I got it So one of the biggest things that I struggled with when I was in HTs, so that's the helicopter training squadron, is when we're doing the RI, I don't know, we're somewhere around RI 12, RI 13 or something. So we're getting close to the RI 18, and you're doing partial panel instrument approaches in a helicopter. And I just remember absolutely struggling to keep the needle up. When you're just trying to do that partial panel scan in a helicopter, it is a nightmare.
Yes.
But, it is what it is. But that's, I hated it. I hated it. That was the only part of instrument flying that I didn't like, but otherwise it was awesome. So
yeah. That airplane, you could do ILS approaches. It taught you all about instrument flying in the clouds because, the vertigo in the clouds, once you're in the clouds, your inner ear will tell you one thing, but your instruments will tell you something different, and you got to trust the instruments.
Absolutely.
You got to trust.
Quick story backing up the T-34s. I don't know why the name comes to me, but it's one of the instructors in VT-27. I recall his name as being Guy Close, Marine captain. And I believe it was him that was out on a hop, and he had a new instrument student in the back seat who was just killing it. And he's like, wow, man, this guy is really watering my eyes. It is amazing. And then he had him doing his standard rate turns, standard climbs, that sort of thing. And on one of the standard rate turns, he's looking out the window to the right, and the student's under the bag in the back, and he sees the silhouette of the student's helmet on the wing as a shadow. And he's like, so he looks at his mirrors, and what he can see is in his mirror that the hood is up. The student has the hood up, and it's all good to go. So he has him do the turn again just to be sure. And sure enough, the student had taken the hood, pulled it forward, and attached it via Velcro to his glare shield, his dashboard panel. and then taking it from behind his head and slid it all the way forward so he had lateral vision out the canopy and could see what was up and what was down and when he was climbing and when he was turning. So he got a below for head work or an unsat for head work and had to redo the flight. But
we were told if he did that. Yeah, we were told if you did that, that was an automatic down.
Yeah.
But yes, I do remember hearing stories about that in the past. On that,
if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying was the other saying they had in flight school, right?
But when it came,
but you needed to be able to do that. That's the whole thing. That's why that's obviously why it's a down, but it is pretty funny.
Yeah. So, when I finished up in Corpus Christi, you got to pick your squadron to go to, and I found out that there was a squadron over in Spain, back to Europe, where I competed in track. And they did intelligence gatherings, signal intelligence. We call it SIGINT for short, signals intelligence. And they went out and collected data. I thought, well, that sounds like the place I want to be. So I signed up for that, got the billet, got the assignment, went through other schools, went to Jacksonville to learn how to fly the P3, through the Sears School, leadership management training, and then off to Rota, Spain, which is in the southwest corner of Spain. It's you can't find it on a map. You look for a town called Cadiz, Cadiz, and it's just north of the bay there, the Cadiz Bay. So
beautiful. Yeah.
So I checked into I arrived over there, checked into my squadron, and here the government had spent me, $2 million to train us as pilots. And you show up in the squadron, and they said, okay, you're going to be the HRMO, the Human Resource Management Officer. Wait a minute.
What was that?
I'm a pilot. I'm a pilot. I want to fly. And they go, well, no, you got to do your
collateral duty.
It's the SLJO. You are now the shitty little jobs officer. Welcome to the squadron, Ensign.
Well, so I go, well, okay, what? I can't remember who I asked. I said, what's the Human Resource Management Officer do? And they said, well, we're not sure, but go downstairs and you'll see a little room. It's unmarked, and go down the hallway. And at the end of the hallway, that's where you're going to be. So okay. They said, well, the good news is you report right to the executive officer, who was Commander Quigley at the time. I said, okay, that's great. So I go down there, find the hallway, go down, open the door, and it's basically a closet with a desk, and there's a petty officer sitting there. And I introduced myself, and he said, he was a petty officer, I can't remember his name. And I said, can you tell me what we do here? And he said, well, we deal with kind of spousal cases. And I thought, well, great, I'm single. What do I know about spousal cases? Here again, my arrogance is coming back. Yeah. And he said, well, I said, how often do we do this? And he goes, well, we're a squadron of about 750 people assigned to the squadron. It was a huge squadron, 750.
That is big. Holy smokes. How many airplanes did you have in that squadron?
Well, this is interesting. We had two types of airplanes. We had the EP3s, and I believe we had 7 of those, 6 mission birds, and then the A3 whales. Do you guys remember? That's the EP3 there.
Yep. So for our listeners, I'm putting a picture of an EP3 up on the screen, which is a standard P3 with a whole bunch of bubbles on the belly and the back that he can't talk about.
Well, yeah. So, the black, you've heard of a black box type stuff.
Yeah.
Anything black on there was pretty much sensitive equipment, picking up
electronic countermeasures, intel gathering.
Gathering. We didn't do any jamming, but it was just intel gathering type thing. We had the A3 whale, the twin engine A3 that had been around since just after the Second World War.
Right. Big jet, 3-man crew. The A3D was often referred to, I think we talked about it on the last show or a show before that. The A3D stood for all 3 dead.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
They didn't have an ejection seat. They had parachutes to jump out of that thing if they had.
Yeah, they didn't have ejection seats. The Air Force had they called it the B-66, I believe.
Yeah.
But with 750 personnel assigned to the squadron, something was bound to, is how the petty officer put it, something bound to happen. And sure enough, a few minutes later, knock on the door. A a wife comes in and says her husband has been deployed. She has no money to pay the bills. So we arranged to get over to dispersing, type thing. So what was really good about that job was I got to meet with Commander Quigley, the XO at the time. And he was an outstanding skipper. He was my favorite skipper because I had good skippers, but he was my favorite because he never talked to you behind his desk. If you knocked on his door, went into his office, he always came around from around his desk and sat down at a table with you and then discussed the issue. But never would he do that behind a desk. And that's
very cool.
That was an example of leadership I picked up on early on, that when you sit behind the desk, you think you have the authority and the power over somebody. He never, you'd almost forget he's an 05. That's how he was. He was just so personal about stuff on it.
That's
so we got
awesome.
to work through issues, legal issues, things like that. And then I got moved over to the training department. And in the training department, the department head was Lieutenant Commander Rick Huska, really good guy. We got along great. And he looked at me and he looked at my stuff and he said, most pilots here don't make electronic warfare aircraft commander until they're lieutenants, 03s in the squadron. Do you think he could do it as a lieutenant junior grade? I'm like, well, yes, sir. I'll put forth the effort. So in our squadron, you had to learn systems just for the aircraft alone. And you would walk around. This was your life. I don't know if you could see it, but this is called a PQS, Pilot Qualification System. And this is how you worked your way up to become an electronic warfare aircraft commander. And you had to sit down and discuss systems. The P3 community is very system oriented. Hydraulics, electrical, prop. The prop was a major one, obviously, for that. Fuel system. You had to be able to sit down with either a flight engineer or another instructor type pilot in the squadron and describe and go into detail of every system on the aircraft. And then as they did, they would sign you off, on each.
Nice. Okay. Yeah.
This was the life. If you lost this book and had to start over,
God help you.
On that. On the other end of it, we had to learn about what the mission was about. Some of it's classified. I won't go into that, but we had to know about all the Soviet ships, all the aircraft, the missiles, the radars, all of this. So when you heard him in the back with the senior evaluator, who's usually the senior officer in the back, talking about various radar systems, we had to know, for instance, if a certain country was going to arm their SA-5 missiles, which were designed to shoot down very slow-moving aircraft as we were, and to bug out type thing. So, overall, it was great. It was really difficult to learn that, but at the same time, Rick really pushed me to be studying. He contact me, make sure that I knew the systems, that I was on board, I was on track, that I was going to get it done by the time while I was still a lieutenant junior grade. So That was really good that he kind of took me under his arm and really worked with me on that stuff. So I worked my way up to aircraft commander, got signed off for that. And then we had a mission board where you have 5 or 6 mission qualified that would just kind of grill you for questions, maybe five to six.
I was going to ask that, if you had like a board or something that you had to go through at the end, because that's what when I was still flying in the Coast Guard, that's what we had to do, and there was total same deal. There's a whole personal qualification standard that you had to go through, as well as a whole syllabus hop, with all sorts of flights and search patterns and all of that. Did you guys obviously had standardization checks like once a year and stuff like that too?
Yeah, I forgot the group was called, but they would come in and then we'd spend, I don't know, maybe a month prepping for those tests.
Yep.
I think I could probably still pass those tests today. That's how much they were drilled into my head.
Right. Absolutely. You will not forget.
If they put those questions in front, I could probably just go through the test. On that.
So let me back up a second, though, because you had an interesting number there a minute ago. You were talking about how there was about 750 people in the squadron and 2 different types of airplanes. But why? Why were there so many people in the squadron? Describe an EP3. There were 2 pilots.
Well,
And then who else? That was not a small airplane, and you generally had a couple people in the back with you.
well, we usually flew missions, 8-hour missions with 3 pilots. Sometimes we go longer, depending on what we needed. We flew missions for the fleet, NSA, no such agency, DIA. We got tasked by various groups to fly different types of missions.
Okay.
We usually flew with 3 pilots, 8 to 12 hours. On our missions. And I think in our squadron, we had 150 officers in the squadron. But because we had the A3, you had more personnel for that side too. And that's why it was so big. And I think it's just because the Navy just said, oh, well, let's, instead of opening up the second base up, let's just put them all into rota.
Right. So. But I guess what I'm asking also then is you had duty stations in the back of your airplane. How many stations were in the back of that airplane, roughly, on average?
6, 7, 8, 9. We had about 14. So 14. Some would take a break.
So there were people working in the back, running all kinds of computers and screens and comm equipment and that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, we had various people back there. We had people with curtains around them that you couldn't see what they were doing.
You aren't. Tell me you weren't allowed to know.
I basically didn't want to know. Type thing. So we actually deployed to Athens, Greece, to fly most of our missions, either down south or to the east into Eastern Mediterranean, and then we'd either deploy up to England to fly up in the Baltic type thing. And so,
nice.
Yeah. So flying in the Baltic was fun because I think, we were out there one time and we got intercepted by a Soviet Su-24 or Su-27 flanker off our wing. That's the one. Soviet built.
If you want to see this go to our YouTube channel or Rumble channel and look at this show. And we're about, I'm going to say about 40 minutes in, and that's the picture of the flanker that he's talking about.
Yeah. So it's got the Soviet star on the tail, but looking under where the pilot sits, we believe that it was part of either the Lithuanian or Latvian Air National Guard. So we have the Air National Guard here in the United States. Those countries also had their own Air National Guard with their symbols on that. Yeah. So
one of the things that I picked up on it is if you look on the back of that jet, there's a great big panel sticking up with a post behind it. And that's a hydraulic piston that's pushing up the dude's speed brake. He's trying to stay slow
that's got to be a speed brake or something.
Yeah.
So that for those who can't see it, it looks like and I think it was the equivalent to or the Soviet answer to the F-15.
Yeah, looks about like that. Yeah,
it's kind of a combination of the F-15 and F-14, I think.
Yeah.
He's
got some armament under his wing.
Yes, he was fully loaded with missiles, no external fuel tanks. And I think at the time, he flew with us for a little bit, and then there was a British Nimrod, which is a 4-engine jet that the Brits used. And that's
similar mission, right?
Same type of mission. They obviously flew higher. We were like 24,000 feet. The Brits were up around 30,000 feet. He'd hang with us, and then he'd go up there and hang with them. We could see their contrail, and he stayed with them, and then he came back with us. And I think we figured he was airborne for about 3.5 hours. And when they sent that report in, we got a response back on there's no way a flanker can fly 3.5 hours without external fuel tanks. We said, well, he did. He was
there. He was.
There he was.
He was there.
Yeah. So there he was.
That's right.
off that wing. But yeah, it's the Cold War, the Soviets and the U.S. and stuff. But his pilots were all friendly. We were waving. He'd wave back. He kept his distance. There was no threat at all. At all when he was flying over there. But we'd fly in the Med off Libya, Egypt. We'd fly off Syria, just collecting everything we could. They'd file the reports and send them in on that. So it was a lot of fun. But one thing that did happen to us was we were my third mission. I finally, as a new aircraft commander, still a JG, electronic warfare aircraft commander. Still a JG. We deployed to Athens, Greece, and on my third mission, I think it was in March of '89. We were flying tasked to fly out to the east. My co-pilot, Bob O'Neill, great guy.
Okay.
You know, he took it off. He flew, and he's over there and he's sweating. And I go, "Are you doing okay?" And he goes, "I don't know. I just don't have it today." Now, one thing about these EP3s, these airplanes were older than I was. They were P3 prototypes built in 1960, and I was born after that. These are old aircraft, and the autopilots rarely work, so we were always hand flying these, which was fine. Yeah, it's amazing.
Did they retire the P3? Is that still flying?
They just retired them, but I think my sister squadron's still flying the EP3s right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I go, "Bob, you okay?" And he goes, "Yeah, just take the controls. I'm just feeling exhausted." And I said, "Okay." So I took the controls, and like, God, this doesn't feel right. Where you have the hydraulics that work the flight controls, like
Power steering.
Yeah, like power steering. You have the hydraulic system that works all the flight controls on most aircraft nowadays, except the small private ones.
Sure.
Oh God, this doesn't feel right. So Bob got out of the seat to take a break, and the other pilot, Mike Dizlowski, he gets in the seat, and I go, "Mike, feel this," because this isn't right. And we're heading east, just south of Cyprus, and we're feeling it. It's just like we keep thinking, "Is it us? Is it us?" Just having a bad time. And
this is your third mission? Is it
third
aircraft
mission?
commander?
Aircraft commander. I was still a JG at the time. We
So
flew,
no, were you able to bank at all, or were you?
We could bank. We
Okay.
could turn the airplane. It was just the elevators, the part that made the nose go up and down. As we used to say, houses get bigger, houses get smaller.
Right.
Yeah.
Or in that part, the ocean gets bigger, the ocean gets smaller. So, we had a flight engineer who always sat between us as the pilots. They'd sit back a little bit, and we had a procedure that if your hydraulic boost package failed, he could pull the elevator control to remove the hydraulic pressure, and you could fly manually, but it took a lot of effort to fly it that way too. And he suggested that. And at the same time, I thought, we're not going to make it. I don't think we can complete the mission. This doesn't feel right. So the petty officer was Grozbowski, was his name. He reached down, pulled the elevator control handle, and all of a sudden the nose just went pitched up. And Mike and I were
no. That is not good.
I mean, you're starting to already approaching stall speed, and the nose just went straight up. Mike and I were fighting it. Bob was holding on, and Lieutenant Ed Carmody in the back, who's the character, he came up. He looked at
What the
us.
hell are you guys doing up here?
He didn't even say that. He knew something was wrong, and they went back and shut everything down and put all their crypto gear back into these boxes in case they had to check them out in the water type thing. So we were, as soon as it nose up, Mike and I just pressed. I mean, we pushed and got the nose finally under control. And I said, "That's it. We're declaring an emergency. We're going to go in. We got to divert in." The only closest base we could find that was nearby was the Royal Air Force Base Akrotiri, which is on the southern tip of Cyprus.
Okay.
We were already speaking to them on the frequencies, and we just declared the emergency and got in. Mike got out of the seat. Bob got back in the seat, and we were just fighting this thing. The nose just kept popping up and down.
How far were you from there?
Probably
infinitely far.
Yeah.
Too
That's a
far.
good question. I'd have to look. That's a good question, Sticks. I'd have to look. We were probably about 150 miles away.
Yeah, too far.
Oh,
Yeah.
good God.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We were
no,
straight-
and you're over the water.
We're over the water and
Day or
heading
night?
east, and we're turning back, and we declared the emergency to go in there, and we're fighting this thing. And remember, we had one procedure that that basically said, if your controls are giving you troubles, pull the handle, everything's fine, go land. Well, the problem was there was no procedure for the situation to keep repeating itself over and over, where now where we're supposed to be able to fly the airplane, we're fighting against, there's 3,000 pounds of pressure per square inch of hydraulic fluid in the system, and we're either working with it or against it, and you couldn't tell what the airplane was going to do with the nose. The nose would pop up, the nose would go down type thing. So we worked it in, declared the emergency. Everybody was strapped in the back. We got the airplane in. The controllers were great. The Brit controllers were great getting us in.
Yeah, no, hang on a minute, though. So rather than go back at the end, tell us a little bit about what was going on in the back of the airplane, too, because you had how many people back there?
We had, let's see, about 20-plus people back there.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
So you got an airplane full of people,
and
they know things are not in perfect shape up in the front office.
Well, it's funny how, you find out things after all of this, because we're up front. And, as pilots, we're just concentrating on get the airplane down safely.
Yeah.
I mean, if we couldn't do it, we're going to have to bail the crew out. And do you bail them out over the base? Do we bail them out over the water? Do we bail, that type of thing? I mean, this is all going through my mind while we're on the descent, going in.
And you guys are carrying parachutes?
What's that?
You're carrying parachutes?
We had parachutes, but the four of us up front were so busy trying to control the airplane, we never put them on. But I found out later after we landed, everybody had their chutes on in the back in case we did have to bail.
They're ready to go.
We're out of here. I don't know about you. I'm getting out.
Now, I guess that's better than having the pilots with their parachutes on and the rest of the crew in the back being clueless as to that there might be a problem.
That's so true. That's so true.
So you lose control of the elevator. Now, how were you obviously were using power to control the nose attitude and flaps. What did you actually have to do to get the plane on the deck?
We used the power. We only had manual trim on our airplane, so it was, we tried to use that best we could. Petty Officer Grozbowski would say, okay, I'm going to push the handle back in, get ready. And he'd push it back in. And then, at that time we were already, straight on the controls, getting ready to, is it going to pitch down or up? And then he'd pull it back.
What's it going to do?
So, the other, we did get it on the ground safely. We landed in Akrotiri, taxied in and shut down. You find out things later. I mean, the Brits were just outstanding about it. But the short of it is, when maintenance came, they found out there was a crack in the elevator boost package. So if you think about your car having power steering and you want to turn to the right, the actuator would put pressure in the cylinder to push your wheels to the right. Same with left. But if you got pressure building up on both sides, you can't really turn the wheel. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing we found out, so it was a crack in the pressure, and it was building up 3,000 PSI on both sides of the cylinder. And every time Petty Officer would pull that handle, it would relieve it for a second, but that pressure would build right back up. The other thing was
terrifying.
Absolutely
terrifying. So essentially, to the listeners that are not pilots, what they're dealing with is the airplane is slowly getting less and less controllable. They are soon not going to have the ability to get the nose to go up or down. They can turn left or right, but that's it. And if the nose gets locked in the going up position, it'll go up till the wing runs out of lift, and then it'll fall out of the sky like a brick fecal matter house.
Yeah, that was a consideration also. The other thing we learned after when maintenance went through it, as with aircraft, you have your yoke. You pull back, turn left and right. Well, those are on cables that go back all the way to the tail. And those cables require pulleys, to make things easy.
So they roll smoothly between
the cable rolls smoothly over the cable. We found out later, too, that there were 125 pulleys between the front yoke and the elevators, and we had broken 75 of them just trying to maintain control of the aircraft.
Oh, dear
Not
God.
only were we fighting the hydraulics, we were fighting the friction of the cables on broken pulleys, working our way back and forth, trying to get that nose up and down.
Your airplane's falling apart.
Yeah. Well, they were older than I was.
Yeah. Good God.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. That is just so terrifying.
And quick back of the napkin math from a Marine here, that's 60% of the pulleys are now out of commission.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it was an exciting event for sure. You find out things later. Like I said, we didn't have our parachutes on. Everybody else did. Petty Officer Antoine, who kind of led the back two for the enlisted, because we flew 8-hour missions, we had a huge refrigerator in the back that contained all our box lunches. And he went back and grabbed his lunch, and somebody said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Hey, if I'm bailing out, I'm not going out hungry." So next thing you know, they were throwing out box lunches left and right to everybody. And, God, I hope they left 4 for us at least if we had to bail out. But,
Right.
it's just funny things you talk about afterwards. You land and things.
Shit.
I guess our secure communications person kind of misread what was going on. And he sent a message out to the world, which went back to the squadron that said, "We are having nav problems." And he didn't quite really understand what was going on. And here the rest of the U.S. Navy thought, how can an airplane in the Eastern Med have navigation problems and be lost? Type thing. So,
go north till there's land, go east till there's land, or go south till there's land.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you know how the shape of the Mediterranean is,
Or west till there's land for the most part. You got to really thread that needle to get out on the west.
Yeah. So there were little things like that you learned about. But the Royal Air Force, the wing commander, was outstanding. He was very professional. He said, "I'm glad to get you on the ground." It is an interesting time for us because they were swapping out their Royal Air Force F-4 Phantoms and bringing in Tornadoes that day. And they ended up diverting them with the tankers to some other base just to handle us. I mean, that's how the warm feeling you get, as an ally with the Brits on that issue alone.
Oh, and the priority you got, emergency.
On
That's
that. So
very cool.
After that, I got back to the squadron and I, debriefed with the skipper at the time. What had happened with Commander Quigley. He was now the skipper, told him the whole story. And he's just like, "Yeah, thank you, John," and all that. And I said, "Well, it was a team effort. It wasn't just me and that." So I got encouraged to write an article for Approach Magazine. That's the Naval Aviation Safety magazine that they would put out every month.
Right.
And I actually got they published it in the December 1989 issue for my article and, other safety events, others that did.
Okay.
So.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, let's take a quick break and listen to the folks at Babel have to offer to the listeners. Then I want to come back and talk about some more of your experiences, be it with track and the mentorship and the rest of your career.
Okay.
Did you know that bilinguals outperform monolinguals in tasks requiring working memory? That means Babbel isn't just a language learning app, it's a tool for sharpening your brain's ability to hold and process information. This fall, start speaking a new language in just 3 weeks with Babbel. Why Babbel? Because it works. Instead of paying hundreds of dollars for a private tutor or getting lost in language apps that feel like just another game, Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons crafted by over 150 language experts are the real deal. In just 3 weeks, you can start having real conversations. And here's the thing, Babbel is designed by real people for real conversations. Everything you learn is rooted in real-life situations. It's so easy. The last time I was in France, I confidently ordered food and asked for directions without having to constantly check the translation apps. It felt really good. And when you get an answer right in Babbel, there's this satisfying sound. Listen to this. Apprendre une nouvelle langue est plus facile que je ne le pensais. Which translates, learning a new language is easier than I thought. And this sound is the satisfying sound you hear when you get the pronunciation right. Babbel actually works interactively with you to make sure you sound good, not just look good. Studies from prestigious institutions like Yale and Michigan State University keep proving Babbel's efficiency. In fact, using Babbel for just 15 hours is like wrapping up a full semester at college. And with over 10 million subscriptions sold, trust me, Babbel is the real deal for real conversations. Here's a special limited time deal for our listeners. Get started right now with 55% off your Babbel subscription. Remember, this offer is exclusive to our listeners, so visit babbel.com/so there I was. That's BABBEL.com/so there I was. Rules and restrictions may apply. Go to babbel.com/so there I was for 55% off your subscription. Were any of your other emergencies even close to that much fun? Or?
We had a few. I think I had three engine landings. The old chip light, which is a little magnetic detector in the engine, somewhere in the engine.
In the oil, oil sump.
Oil, and it picks up fragments, and once it has enough metal to make a contact, you get what I call a chip light. Chip light comes on. And then you do a precautionary engine shutdown.
Yeah, so that tells you basically that your engine is grinding metal parts off within itself and starting to eat itself alive.
Yeah, I had three of those. I think
I saw one night I was on a DC-10 down in Florida, and they had a chip light, and the mechanic pulled it. That bolt it looked like a chia pet. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. Usually you get a chip light, there's maybe 8 or 10 chips on that thing. This thing was covered. It looked like hair standing up on the end of that magnetic bolt. It was terrifying that engine was still.
I've seen those too. It's really interesting when they pull those.
Yeah. And you guys in helicopters, man, that was holy smokes. So
yeah, well, when I was trying to think how far offshore we were. I want to say somewhere between 30 or 40 miles, and we had a main gearbox chip light. And
I told you that thing's a whirling death trap.
Yeah, I was like, we're making a beeline to the closest point of land, and but that got our attention. And that was pretty. There was some good recent chips there. So, and we used to get chip lights on the engines all the time. That was pretty common. Usually it was fuzz. You could just clear it off, and you could press on. So, it's helicopters. They're cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at least you had 3 engines to land. You ever do less than 3? You ever shut down an entire side or?
Well, interesting. One time we did get the chip light, so we shut down. I think the number 3 engine, and then we found out as we went through clouds with icing, the number 2 bleed would not turn off. The bleed valve would not close, and that was blowing hot air onto sensors and stuff. So as we headed back over Rota, I'm flying over the field about 1,000 feet or so, and we already told the squadron, hey, we're coming back in, 3 engines, and as we decided we didn't have any secondary on the number 3 engine with chip light, but we had to shut down the number 2 engine. So I called for let's do a restart of number 3. As we're flying over the field, everybody is out there looking and seeing the airstream. We use the airstream to spin the top to get it back up to speed to relight the engine. And now everybody's thinking, oh my God, their engine failed to feather. They have got an engine failed to feather, which is a pretty severe thing because of all that drag of the
Now it's drag. Okay, yeah.
All that extra drag on there, and they're calling us. And finally, we just called them and said, no, we had to do a shutdown of number 2 and restart number 3. Everything's fine. We're going to be on the ground in 5-10 minutes. Type thing.
Yep. We're busy right now. Leave us alone.
Yeah,
exactly. I'm going to back up for our non-aviation listeners. So feathering the prop is a huge piece, and what that does is that turns the propeller so that the blade is going in line with
90 degrees to the wind. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So because if you don't feather that prop, it creates a massive amount of drag. So
it's like sticking your hand out the window at 80 miles an hour.
Yeah, exactly.
Flat as opposed to lift. Oh man.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Dix. And yeah, that's it's important because if you're landing with all that extra drag, that's a lot more aircraft to handle bringing in. So on that. But
would it fly on 2 engines?
Oh yeah, we actually practiced. We didn't shut the 2 engines. When you go down low, generally the P3s who did the submarine hunting, and we did it also. You would go down low shut one engine down as you're flying low, the airplane would fly just fine. You wouldn't even know it.
Okay.
And if you got light enough, you could actually shut down two engines and cruise around at low level, taking photos of Soviet ships and stuff.
So you did that for fuel savings?
Yep, for fuel savings.
What are you, nuts?
Yeah. Yeah, that's that's what you
Actually,
signed up for.
the Coast Guard C-130s do that to extend their range too. So as far as I know, so yeah, they it's not a uncommon practice. But.
Yeah, as long as your propellers feather, it's all good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, on the YouTube channel, I'll bring up a ship or two here. For those that are watching, if you want to go watch it on YouTube, youtube.com.
So this is
com/YouTube. It'll get you there.
Yeah. So this is a Soviet submarine ship that we took a picture of when we went down low. It was in the Mediterranean at the time. You can see all those tubes. Those are surface-to-surface missiles. They're basically designed to take out an aircraft carrier.
Okay.
This actual ship, its sister ship, the Moscow, was sunk, I think, by the Ukrainians last year in the Black Sea.
Okay.
On that one. And then as far as our missions go, we had to name all those missiles, the radars associated with the missiles. And if you really look at the photos, you can see I could probably pick out right now 12, 14 radars right now, just looking at that photo.
Right. Yeah. All the little domes and such on different parts of the
right. You have long-range radars. You have targeting radars. You have mid-range radars. Type thing. And that's what we had to know for our mission board. That was just part of it.
I kind of get that, but that's it's cool to know it. But as a pilot, it kind of didn't matter to you. You had to keep the blue side up, the gray side down. What the radars were on those boats and that kind of stuff. That's the thing I found.
If you knew what the targeting radars were, and you heard somebody in the back, say this just went active, then you may want to consider diving for the deck.
Okay.
You don't know if it's going to happen. At one time, a Soviet ship had fired on a P-3 as it was flying by, but they think it was a blank. They're still not sure about it, but we were out there at the time, and they did a recall. We had to get out of there, but it just happens. It's just that's just how it was out there between us and and the Soviets out there. It was just a little bit of a chess game going on the entire time. What are they going to do? What are we going to do? Type things.
Yeah. And Taco's listening. He points out in a comment that they didn't care either. They just nuked everybody. They irradiated all their sailors.
Yeah.
They didn't want to have kids anyways.
No such thing as Soviet OSHA. So, holy cow. But no, I just find that an interesting contrast betwixt the communities in naval aviation. The single seat guys, we had to know that, how many wings were on the airplane? 2. And you guys had to know, how many rivets on the cowling of the number 3 engine. And
yeah, it was just about like that. Springs and weights and electrical system, and what if this fails?
All the mindless knowledge. And I'm lest someone take my my criticism wrong. It's more poking fun than criticism, because in reading Chuck Yeager's book, I remember he talked about how many a good pilot died because they didn't know their system's cold, and that's how he credited many of his own saves that he saved himself, because he knew his system's cold. And there's no fault in the P3 guys. You guys knew your system's cold. And,
sure did.
I would say we were professional, and we knew. And, with the old joke was we didn't know our emergency procedure checklist in the Harrier. We lived it. But and there's some truth to that. You had to know that stuff in order to survive when things went to crap on you. But it just was interesting to me how the more crew on an airplane, the more you guys poked at each other constantly. What do you know about this? What do you know about that?
Oh yeah, no, totally. What's funny is my approach, my kids unfortunately had to learn how to drive from me. And so I took the naval aviators approach in teaching my kids how to drive. So one of the things that I do with them is I would take them over to a parking lot and get them driving around the parking lot, and then reach over and shut the ignition off, or turn the engine off to accessory. So the lights still stay on, but this way they're able to learn that they can still control the car and bring the car to a stop. And that actually paid off once because one of my kids inadvertently shut off the engine. His knee came up, hit the ignition, and he was able to get the car off to the side of the road.
Well, that's
So,
outstanding.
you know,
Yeah, I
and
did that with my kids. I took them to some place, the where am I thing. I would take them out to some neighborhood they didn't know about. Okay, now you got to take me home.
Yep.
That's how they pass their check ride.
Well, yep. And my kids get a check ride, about once a month. I go back out with them, check and see what they're
That's
doing.
great.
And what's also kind of funny is I
I'm
make
too
them
terrified to ride with my kids.
Well, I make them draw a map out, by hand from memory, and so yeah, they unfortunately get the naval aviators approach to teaching kids how to drive. So, but
That's
good.
great.
Good. Yeah, that was pretty much my time in Rota. I did some other fun things too, but it was a great squadron to be associated with. And after that, I went to NAS Kingsville. They were the Navy was phasing out the A3, and they were looking for ES3 pilots. And I thought, well, I've got the EP3 side of it. I could go out and fly the ES3 and put in for it. And they said, okay, well, and my Commander Officer Skipper Commander Quigley said, okay, I looked into it, and they'll have to send you to Kingsville to be an instructor in jets. And I was like, well, yes, sir. Of course, my brain was like, yes.
Yeah, right.
Something different, because I wanted to fly anything I could touch, anything I could get my hands on. And Kingsville was a great experience also. When I got there, I was over at the wing, and one of the senior commanders came over to me and asked, John, do you know how to fly an ILS? Well, I hadn't flown an ILS since the T-44 days because our airplanes were they were so old that we didn't have ILS. I think we had a localizer signal, which was basically, a signal that came from the runway. Would come up and you pick it, you tune in on it, and it would just say, okay, the runway's that way. Just head that way. Type thing.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in for a quick second. So for Instrument Landing System, ILS, imagine a string being drawn from the runway back up to a point up in the air, and you're going to follow that string down. You have instruments that gives you horizontal and vertical guidance. Okay,
right, thanks.
Yeah.
But with the localizer, you didn't have that string going up. You just said the runway is right over there. But when they asked me that, I said, oh, yes, sir, I know how to fly an ILS. And they said, okay, great. You're on the T-45 project because we don't know anything about an ILS. And the Goshawk has got that. I said, sure, I'd love to. So I jumped on that program too. And it was a great group that I was working with in Kingsville. That's the shot right there of all of us. I'm up there on the wing. And those were all of us involved as the first.
Getting the Goshawk up and running in Kingsville, huh?
Yeah. First non-test pilots all qualified to fly the Goshawk.
That does not look like it's fun to fly.
No.
Oh, it was a lot of fun to fly.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Very cool. Oh, man. So, any interesting experiences as an instructor in that thing?
In the 45?
Yeah.
We didn't instruct students. We just took.
My misunderstanding. Okay, so you were just getting other instructors up to speed. Yeah.
We were getting. Actually, we were flying it for like a year just to test fly it. Before the instructors would come, the students would get signed into VT-21, which was the first squadron to get those aircraft on it. So they.
So were you generating and also potentially generating like the NATOPS procedures for this?
We were working on it. Yes. NATOPS procedures were pretty good. We would add to it based on what we saw on things. I mean, the good thing for me was being an instructor in Kingsville in the T2s. They told me initially, well, you're not a tactical air guy. You're not a fighter guy. So you're not going to know anything about, formation flying or TAC air or air to air, or we did air to air gunnery type thing with, 4 airplanes going against a banner being towed by another airplane.
Yeah.
Well, when I got on the T-45 project, they said, well, we got to get you all these quals. So they sent me back over with the T2s, and then I did some with the A4s to get qualified on all of that. So, and it also allowed me with the T2 to get qualified to get some carrier landings in with the T2 Buckeye. And that was a great experience for me too, because being a P3 guy, that's rare to get.
Right? Yeah. Told me
That's
that
awesome.
wasn't a kick in the pants, huh? Going to the
Yeah.
boat.
Oh yeah, it's exciting on that.
I think I've said it on here too at one point, but the first time I got shot off the front of the Lexington in the T2, I was screaming like a little girl out of just sheer delight and joy. I was like, "Oh, that's awesome!" And as soon as the cat stroke let go and I was airborne off the bow, I literally had to look down and go, "Did my engines quit?" Because it was so much quieter. Even though
Right.
both engines are running at full power, it was so much quieter as opposed to getting shot down the cat stroke that I was like, "Oh my God."
That's
good.
what I remember. And my first was at night because they took us instructors in later in the day. And by the time they got me to the catapult, it was nighttime.
Yeah, you're experienced. You can handle it. What are you insane?
Yeah. Well, I shot off the
Now
cat.
it's scary.
I shot off the cat, and then I'm like, I don't know, 50 feet above the water, and I go, God, did the air boss say I could climb? And finally, I just had to ask, is it okay for me to climb to head back to Kingsville? And he kind of gave me a, yeah, climb, get out of here, get out
Get
of my
away
airspace.
from the water, dumbass.
Yeah, well, that was his tone, but I deserved it.
Oh man.
So what was it like trapping for the first time?
Well, it was really interesting. I'd worked with students for about 2 years, just, in the pattern. When I finally figured out how to fly the ball, which is the Fresnel lens
Yeah.
that we did with the angle of attack and touching down and, getting airborne again. And when I finally got to do it, I just did what they told me to, begin your turn at the beam of the boat. As we were going in, it was kind of interesting. I was the wingman going in, and the lead, and the ceiling, I think, was low. It was like 700, 800 feet. And the lead went in, he broke, and he disappeared into the clouds. Like, well, okay. Okay, 1001, 1002, and then I broke left. And fortunately, I broke out, and then I could see the Eisenhower. And I just did my procedures, speed, gear down, flaps down, hook up, because they wanted me to do 2 passes.
Oh, touch and goes before you do.
Touch and goes. Yeah. You're nervous. I can understand the student's position. You turn your base leg. Okay, am I at this altitude, 450 feet? As I turn in, roll on the funnel. I can see the ball. You go through those procedures, flying the power down. And then as soon as you touch down and you hit metal, and if you feel it, and you're like, and you go airborne, and you're like, I can do this. This is cool.
Yeah.
This is what a feeling. And there's just no Disneyland ride, Disney World ride that could.
No, not even close, right?
And I came around again, did the same thing, and then they said put the hook down. Did the hook, had the hook down, but I was not. Even though I kept thinking hook down, lock my harness, hook down, lock my harness.
Yeah.
And boy, that decel is like hitting a brick wall. It's not like what you see in the movies or anything of any. You hit a brick wall.
So the first time I went out into T2, got 2 touch and goes on the boat. Like, okay, this I got this wired. This is cool. Not a problem. Okay, drop your hook. Come around, meatball lineup, angle of attack. Here it come. Everything's looking good. Touchdown. And I remember looking over to the right, like, okay, what am I going to slow down here? And I'm watching what we lovingly referred to all the deck apes. Look at them all standing there. They're all looking at me, and I'm all looking at them. And then comes the bow, or the angle deck goes by me, and the airplane settles a little bit, and I climb back out. And I go, what the hell happened? Finally come back around and tried again and got aboard. I actually got an okay pass, which is the not okay underlined, but a very good grade for that landing. And they said, you got a hook skip bolter. The hook didn't have enough down pressure. It skipped over the wire, and you would have had a 3-wire, and you were good to go. You boltered. I had enough gas for one more pass, and then I was going to have to bingo, min gas back to land. And so the second time it caught, and that's when they took me over to the island, chained me down, started fueling me. I'm sitting there. It's the only time you can relax, right? Even a little bit on the carrier.
Yeah, I remember that.
When you're chained down and they're fueling you, don't do that. Don't relax, because bad things are going to happen. So I'm semi-relaxed, and the next thing I know, I feel boom, and the whole airplane rocks. And I go, ugh. I look over. They taxied another airplane right into my wingtip.
Oh,
Oh man! All I got, I don't even have a toothbrush out here. I got my bag on, and that's it. My flight suit, nothing else. And so about 3 or 4 minutes later, out comes a roll of speed tape. They've got aluminum tape. They tape up my wingtip. They shoot me off the front. I get 4 more traps.
That's awesome.
And then I get qualified and back to land. So I'm like, so I did my first carrier qualification with a taped up wingtip.
High speed duct tape.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Good.
Like aluminum coated duct tape.
Yeah.
So my experience at the boat was the scariest one that I had was landing at night to a 210-foot Coast Guard cutter, which has a helideck that's maybe about 30 feet by 30 feet and about 15 feet of maybe 10 to 15 feet of difference between the front end of the rotor arc and the superstructure. And, that was just terrifying. When you literally hear about landing on an aircraft carrier is like landing on a postage stamp. Landing on a Coast Guard cutter.
You had a lot less tolerance than we did on our.
You get over your spot and you kind of just dropping. You're not slamming your collective down, but you're not dawdling. You get over your spot and there's like about a 3-foot diameter circle with a grid that's built into it, like a steel structure, and underneath the helicopter we have this thing called a talon, and when that came down, the wheels would touch down, you collapse the weight on wheel switch, and then the talon would reach down and grab the helicopter or keep the helicopter on the deck and keep you from rolling off. But still, it's just scary. So
terrifying.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Whoever came up with the idea of landing airplanes and helicopters on boats? What are they thinking? That shit's dangerous,
especially at night.
Exactly. Oh man, that stuff's terrifying. All right, hey, we're getting near time to land the airplane, but we were chatting beforehand, and you told me about a story when you were over in Europe, and you doing some running, and you got to film a commercial.
Yeah, that was kind of, So they on the NES Roto radio station or something, they'd advertise like, "Hey, if you're a runner, show up tomorrow morning at 7:00 or something." I had no idea what it was about. So usually in the mornings, I'd go into the gym and work out. And I saw them out there with cameras and stuff when I showed up. And they said, "Okay, run from here to that point over there." And I did. And I gave them my name. And about 2 weeks later, I get a call and said, "Hey, we're filming a commercial for a drink called Lucozade. It's a drink they serve in Great Britain. And we need you on these dates. Will you be there?" And I said, "Okay, let me call you back. I'll get permission from the squadron. I mean, how many days do you need me?" And they said 3 days. So I showed up. And it turns out that I'm with these British Olympic sprinters. One's named Derek Redman, and the other one's Daley Thompson. And to be honest, I can't remember the third one, and I apologize for that.
But these guys are no slouches. They're Olympic sprinters.
Daley Thompson won the decathlon, I think, at the LA Olympics in '84.
Okay.
This is, I think, '89 or something. And so they have us set up. And long days of waiting, but they'd have us set up at night that we're
hurry
going
up and
to
wait.
Hurry up and wait. That we're going to be running with Derek Redman. Now, Derek, just to flash forward, Derek Redman is the one in the '92 Barcelona Olympics in the 400 meters. He's the one who pulled a muscle, and his father came down from the stands,
right,
to help to assist him around the track. And that's the same Derek Redman. Awesome. Yeah. So, Derek ended up going to the Olympics to represent Great Britain. So as we're filming this, the director tells us what you're doing. Okay, everybody start at this point. They had Derek in lane 4. I was in lane 3 and the inside. And there were some other runners that had shown up. I think a couple from Spain had been there too, and they were also sprinters. We come down the straightaway, and I'm right there with Derek. And I hadn't sprinted in 2 years, but get back to my ego and competitiveness. I mean, I can't let Derek beat me. I just can't do it. So as we're getting closer to the finish line, I just lurch forward and I cross the tape first. And I'm like, in my brain, I'm like, I'd be an Olympic runner. And the director comes out and goes, "Please don't do that. We want, we need Derek to win, because the point of the commercial is Derek wins. He's got to go do another race. He can't finish. He doesn't have the energy. Daley Thompson will walk up, give him a Lucasade. He drinks it and goes back and finishes the race. Well, that's the race he's supposed to win after drinking the Lucasade. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So as we come down the straightaway again, I'm right with him. And then in the end, I just slowly back off. And we crossed the line. Derek was a great guy, great character. Love being around him, just a really joyful guy. And he turns to me, he goes, "Mate, stop pushing me so hard." Sorry, it's what I do, We did I think 4 or 5 takes, but it was back then. European television was a different format. I did not have a European TV, but I got to. I'd walk in the squadron, and somebody would walk up and go, "I saw you on TV last night. You were sprinting down. Was that you? Was that you?" And I said, "Yes." But, I've looked on YouTube. I can't find that commercial anywhere.
Oh, no kidding. All
yeah.
right.
There's a lot of
one of our listeners can find it and send it to us.
Yeah, if somebody finds it, I'd love to see it. But I would be in the inside. I think I had a blue tank top on, uniform top. But it was really great to experience that while I was overseas. And again, it was just kind of like a little carry on, a little track legacy of my competitiveness and stuff.
Hey, Briggs, do us a favor and don't beat the Olympic runner, please. But the Olympic runner has to win.
Yeah.
So I need to know how slow do you think everybody else was at AOCS?
How slow?
Yeah, we're like when you were running, were you like going, "Oh my God, these guys"?
Well, we didn't really do the sprints. We did rifle runs, and we had to stay as a group.
Okay.
But I do remember we had to go from one building to another, carrying our sea bags in our front, everything we had. And they would make us run around the block. And I got behind somebody that's really slow. And finally he fell. And I think and they wouldn't let me pass him. And when he fell, I think I actually used the sea bag as a cushion to drop on his body, roll around, get back on my feet, and then just keep going as we went into Battalion 2 on that end. So, but there wasn't, everything was group done because you're done as a class. So there really wasn't anything where I could just stand out and start sprinting. We had the 1.5 mile run. That was pretty much it.
Yeah. I was always in okay shape, but I was amazed at the fact, I think my best time in 3 miles was a little under 20 minutes, 19 and a half. 1940, something like that, not bad. And to get a 300 on the PFT in the Marine Corps, you had to be able to do an 18-minute 3 mile run. And we had guys crossing at 14:45, 14:15. You're just going, oh man, that is just.
Well, I was a sprinter. I kind of died out after the first mile, but it was still fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, but still, to watch the speed of these guys that would do it.
And I just remember our drill instructor, Staff Sergeant Carney, just. "You better catch him, Briggs," type thing. You just always hear their voice and everything you did. Even today, sometimes you work out, you can still hear your drill instructor's voice.
Totally. I remember, so at the academy, I went to Kings Point, and so my plebe year, I remember, I just felt like we were running like nonstop, and I was running as fast as I could. And then I get to my senior year, and I'm actually helping to run the plebe class, and I'm looking at my plebe class, and I'm going, "My God, these guys are slow." And I'm like, you guys just pick it up.
Yeah, the thing about AOCS is the drill instructor's voice it just never leaves you. It just anytime going into Akrotiri with our thing, it was just that perseverance that would just keep you going. And keep you going.
Yeah, you're not allowed to quit. You can quit anytime you want, but you're not allowed to, really.
Yeah, we're not, right. But you're at the point, you're not quitting because we trained you. You're going to complete the mission.
Right.
I think we talked about briefly, you were talking about your, you talked to your parents, and I remember the same feeling. I never wanted to quit anything more in my life, but I was so pissed off I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of doing it. And I think you said, you talk to your parents all the time. It's like, hey,
I did. And, they were very encouraging. They said, there's nothing for you to come home to. Just stick it out for another day. And as we had a saying, at AOCS, days go like weeks and weeks went like days. You stuck it out. Next thing you know, it was the weekend. And now you could have a little bit of time to catch up, get polished, get ready for a room locker inspection type thing, and get ready for the next week. And long days, but therefore, next thing you know, it's another weekend. So.
But interestingly, you said it, and it served you well during your emergency, that you knew you had to persevere. There was no quit. There's no giving up.
Yeah.
You know what prepped me for the academy? It was there was a book that I'd read, Sense of Honor by James Webb, which really sort of put me in that mental place that I needed to be. And the thing is I never visualized myself quitting. I just didn't. I mean, it would pop into your head, but I shut it out. And I think that's about the only way you get through something like that.
Yeah.
You're right. There are times like, I don't think I can do it with a swim. Maybe I should just quit now. But, you'd think about quitting, you'd want to quit, but you wouldn't quit. Yeah. So you just persevere and continue.
You're going to have to throw my ass out.
Yeah. And we knew once you said DOR, you're done. There was no ever going back to AOCS. I think one person tried, and it took him 3 years to get back in. Yeah. That's how serious they were about it.
Disappeared from the face of the planet for all intents and purposes.
And then the same thing happened, when you're in the plane, and you have an emergency like that, you visualizing, okay, I'm not going to visualize us, failing at getting the plane back down. We're going to get the plane back down one way or another. And that's where I think this all comes together.
And it was a great team effort between Bob and Mike and Petty Officer Grzybowski and myself. We just had to work together as a team. We did work together as a team to get that airplane safely on the ground.
Boy, that's a recurring theme throughout all of our shows. So, Briggs, thank you. Thank you for your service.
You're welcome, guys. Thanks for inviting me.
Glad you came on. And you're welcome back anytime. Love to have you back. Thanks. Tell some more stories. Think of some bullet points. Write them down. Get them to us. And let's come back and have some more fun and some more hijinks.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks to you guys.
And the sacrifices made by your family as well.
Yeah, thanks.
Indeed.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Glad to have you. And thanks to my special Co-Horst, Sticks. Thanks for coming on with us today, Sticks.
No problem, RePete.
Sitting in for Fig, who's sunning himself over on the sunny shores of Italy. So,
there I was, bikini.
Yeah, absolutely. Oof. Well, folks, you stuck with us through another hilarious and nail-biting So There I Was episode.
First and foremost, we salute all the brave men and women who have served and are now serving, and a massive shout out to the family members of all of our veterans. We know they couldn't do it without their sacrifices and support.
On a lighter note, let's give thanks to the tech maestro, Dave Hamilton. He's the reason you're hearing us without too many Foxtrot uniforms. For more of Dave, check out his other shows, Mac Geek Gab for tech enthusiasts, The Gig Gab for musicians, and for the entrepreneurs among you, there's the Business Brain Podcast.
Speaking of pros, the advertising you hear is managed by the talent team at Backbeat Media, online at backbeatmedia.com. And no, they didn't pay us to say that.
Ever find yourself baffled by some of the terms we throw around? Well, if they fly over your head faster than a fighter jet, well, we've got you covered. Dive into our glossary at sothereiwas.us/glossary. If you can't find the term or just want to chat, shoot us an email, whether it's Fig, Sticks, or me, RePete, at sothereiwas.us. We're always up for a good chat or a laugh.
All right, so for all those loyal listeners wanting to show off their love for the show, don't miss out on our merch. We've got everything from t-shirts, hats, mugs, bikinis, which Fig happens to be wearing right now while he's on vacay. And you heard that one right. So go on over to our merch store at sothereiwas.com/merch.
And a massive thank you to our Patreon pilots for keeping our shows soaring. If our antics tickle your fancy and you feel like supporting us for roughly $1.25 a show, head over to sothereiwas.us/Patreon. Your contributions help keep us in the air.
Short on cash, that's totally cool. You can still spread the love by visiting our advertisers, engaging with our Facebook group, retweeting our updates, and by hitting us up with a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Not 4, not 3, but 5. Share the show.
What Sticks said, share the show. Have you done it yet? Stop right now, go out, tell a friend or two, and share the show. Hey, kudos also to our other behind-the-scenes champs. A big thanks to Chase Cole for keeping our Facebook page in check. And to you, Sticks, for your undeniable charm and your production skills, of course. Let's also not forget Brad Silcott over at BDS aviationphotography.com for the stunning visuals on our site. And finally, props to Dos Gringos and their foot-tapping tunes. They're the ones that make the Air Force shine. Find their music on Amazon Music, Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music, and more.
So, as we close the hangar door on today's episode, in the words that echo at hangars and runways,
stay safe and check sixth.
Well, there I was, crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly fond of all the shit I was wearing on that day. Now an F-16 is cramped enough, but it's even worse with all that stuff supposed to save your life. But we knew there was no way. 'Cause when you're going down the North Atlantic, man, it's over.
Whoa, what do you say, Sticks?
it's over.
Yeah, it is. See ya.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.